Welcome to a Tech Moment on Cannabis Tech. I'm your host, Kristina Etter. In this podcast, we take just a few minutes to talk about some of the science and technology that's driving the cannabis and hemp industries. And once a month, we check in with PanXchange after they release their hemp market reports and talk about the information that RJ Hopp draws together as the director of hemp markets at PanXchange. Welcome back to the show, RJ. We're excited to talk this month.
Yeah, thank you for having me back. It's great to be here again.
You know, it just seems like it's been an incredible year all the way around for hemp and cannabis industries, and there's just so many things fluctuating. I love reading your report every month and kind of regrounding myself to the pulse and what's really kind of happening there in the hemp markets and seeing what's going on. So I really appreciate this report. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about this month is, there's a variety of things that you cover in that report, and hemp obviously produces a wide range of products. And you kind of touch base on several of those different kinds of products in this report every month. But do you want to talk about maybe what you're seeing from your perspective of what products are getting the most notice? Is it smokable products? Is it CBD products? Maybe it's more seeds or textiles? Because there's just so many things. So what's really kind of driving the market in hemp right now?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, actually, and it's tough to single out one particular market. However, I'd break that down as kind of near term and long term. So in the near term, I absolutely see the smokable flower and CBD products continuing to, drive forward the lion's share of this market. However, there's a lot of advancements going on the industrial side of the market that I absolutely think have the potential to be much bigger than what we're seeing in the CBD or cannabinoid focused markets, if you will. And I think that a lot of that comes down to the adoption of products and being cost competitive. So textiles, for example, is something I've always been bullish on long term. But if we take Patagonia's current offerings, for example, those that are derived from hemp textiles do have a heavier price tag. So I think that the big driver for those to be cost competitive and, really see no difference from your, oil derived products or cotton, for example, and then kind of looking down for, feed applications from seed, particularly in the animal sector, I think is going to be a very big one as well.
Definitely. And yeah, I always forget about that side of hemp too, as being, kind of an animal product or for the animal or the hemp seeds. And I've even heard of like the small hemp plants being used as animal fodder now too. So it's really interesting to hear that perspective as well. Now, moving more towards human derived products, obviously the USDA is getting more involved and starting to release some of these new regulations. Have there been any more significant developments in the USDA regulations at this point?
Yeah, it's been a big month on that front. So the USDA actually decided to extend the pilot programs for another year. So this year, and this is something we've been covering for, probably about the last 18 months or so, but you have a group of states that are operating under the USDA hemp production rules, and then you have another group of states, traditionally more of your longer standing hemp producing states, I think Colorado and Oregon, for example, that have been under the pilot program, which they've been producing hemp for years under that. So with that decision to extend that deadline, which should have been the 31st for everyone to comply to the USDA rules, basically giving everybody another year, where I think that's real important, as there's some big contentious issues that, particularly, with people in Colorado that have been very much pushing back on certain issues. So it allows people to, kind of fight those issues, mainly circling around DEA involvement with testing, DEA registered labs, how that test is derived with the top third of the plant. So I think it's good that we have an opportunity to make something that works well for the market, although it doesn't necessarily alleviate problems with not having all of the states on the same page. And main things that come to mind there are trucking, for example, where something could be technically legal in one state and then you cross a line, it's technically not legal depending on what rules they follow. And then I guess just kind of one other thing to point out is I actually wrote a blog post on that about a week ago. So if anybody's interested, that's on our website under the blog section there.
Fabulous. We'll share that link for everybody too when we share this out. Now, shifting gears just a little bit, one of the things that we've been talking about over the last couple of months, or at least touching base on, is the total hemp acreage across the United States and the fluctuations that we've kind of seen this year. Do you want to talk about, because you mentioned this in the report this month, what that contrast actually looks like between what we saw in 2019 and what we're seeing now in 2020?
Yeah, another good question there. So in my views, we're seeing the effects of an oversupply market hit production. So last year we saw that massive increase of hemp production, and then this year things are starting to taper off. And I think that that's good for the market because it helps with the supply and demand levels. But it's interesting when you start diving into these numbers. So in September, we saw that number rise from about 48,000 to 62,000 planted acres. And then actually we had the third report come out a few days ago, which pegs it at about 65,000 acres, which is a significant decrease than what we saw last year. And this is something that has been talked about a lot in the industry where, good data is tough to find. And the FSA crop acreage report is something that's heavily relied on in a lot of other commodity markets to assess what supply is going to look like. However, at this point, we're not seeing we're not seeing everybody report their numbers right now. So that 65,000 acre number is low in my opinion. Based off of internal data that we've been able to pull together from various Department of Ags, we see it at about 80,000. However, I think it still has some room to run up a little bit. So I don't think that we're going to have a shortage, but it is important to note that there's a big difference from 2019, which saw prices come down significantly compared to what we're looking at right now.
Interesting. Yeah, that's very, very interesting. Now, kind of related in terms of acreage and things like this, and obviously every month your report goes into detail about some of the different weather variations and things that are impacting the hemp market. Obviously right now we're very concerned about the West and the Northwest and the fires that are still burning up there. Do you want to touch base a little bit on how the hemp farmers are doing in those areas, and how have the fires impacted the hemp market in those regions?
Yeah, and I guess first thing I'd want to say is thoughts and prayers go out to everybody that are up there. It's crazy to see what's going on, and I hope that everyone's doing well. But particular to the hemp market, the Pacific Northwest has been a big production area for hemp. With those fires raises concerns as to what's actually going to happen with the crop that's growing. And I think a lot of the long-standing issues from being exposed to heavy smoke and things like that aren't necessarily known. However, a lot of people are kind of looking to the wine industry actually, as Northern California has dealt with fires in the past where if that vineyard is within about 20 miles of one of those fires, that raises concerns to the product ultimately coming out in the wine, where in wine it has a smoky flavor, but with hemp we have concerns of heavy metals and stuff like that, which can be put into the air and absorbed. And then also kind of the added effect of acres actually being lost. So I think it's going to take a little bit of time to actually assess what's going on. However, one of the cool things from my opinion is that Oregon State is actually doing a lot of research with this right now. So that's something that I'll be closely watching to see, they're having samples being sent in, and then they're testing them for heavy metals and kind of plotting where and how much it was affected. So definitely something to watch for going forward. And I think ultimately shows a little bit more reason to get full panel tests, especially when people are buying biomass or crude oil to put into tinctures or anything else that might be ingested, to make sure that there isn't any elevated heavy metals or other contaminants in there.
Right. And that's something that I think we all kind of, at least those of us in the industry, always kind of fear, is what are those unknowns that could, turn up later in the crop or in processing. You're really not going to know what those contaminations are until you start testing the product. And it's really unfortunate to see that kind of effect happening with the market, especially, when it's in such a fluctuation point anyway. So it's really going to be interesting, like you said, to follow Oregon State and learn what they're finding out there through their research. Now, the last thing that I really wanted to talk about from your report this month, actually, you touch base on the global market in hemp. So do you want to give us a little rundown on what you're seeing internationally?
Yeah, absolutely. And this was a pretty cool segment for us to look into this month. And I guess to kind of back up at a high level first, there's publicly available import and export data for pretty much anything that's out there. With hemp, and I think that this is kind of the same story as the FSA data, that we're still getting processes in place to track everything and know exactly what's going on. But the interesting thing is, a lot of that data does not show cannabinoid import and exports, but does focus on more of the industrial market. I guess kind of a little side note there is, I do know that people have had problems with importing and exporting CBD isolate, for example, just because processes aren't in place in a lot of places. So I guess kind of getting back to the question that you asked, we decided to focus on the industrial market, and a couple of cool things came up. Well, first, there's very much a relationship between the U.S. and Canada, specific to grain and I guess what we call as true hemp, looking at fiber applications. And more specifically there, we've seen the effects of currency play into buying habits. So because of the fluctuations with the Canadian dollar and the US dollar, the Canadian product is cost competitive for US processors to buy and import. However, the big thing with that too is that logistics are a huge part of that equation. So the logistics basically offset that discount that we're seeing from the Canadian product. So basically you see both countries transacting on an equal level, if you will. And I think that's kind of interesting when you dive in further, as a lot of these processors on the industrial side, set kind of a boundary of 150, 100 miles sometimes from the farm gate to the processor to minimize those logistics. So, I guess there's a preference to buy closer to home. However, it's interesting to see that kind of both markets are acting in equilibrium, if you will, in that there is cross-border trade right now. And I guess kind of to summarize all of that, I've long been a proponent that the industrial side of this market will become a globally traded commodity. So seeing that start to come to fruition a little bit is cool, and definitely gives some some interesting things to look out for over the next coming months, and ultimately going forward the next 5 or 6 years too.
Right. I think the future of this industry is so bright. I honestly, I don't think that we can all fully grasp just what hemp is going to do for us here in the future. It's coming, and we're all very hopeful, I think. But we so appreciate your report every month, RJ. It really is enlightening, and it's great to be able to see your perspectives and get some of that input from the commodities perspective and the different things that you talk about. So do you want to quickly tell everybody where they can go to sign up for your report?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the two easiest ways to do so is to either reach out to us by email at hemp@panexchange.com, or you can also go to our website and with the top menu, you can click on hemp. You can read a little bit more about what our product offerings are, and we'd be happy to show more of what we do there. So by either the website or email, we'd be happy to connect with you.
Great, RJ. And it's always a pleasure to have you on the show each month. And I hope that you have a great month this month, and we'll see you next month.
Absolutely. Take care, Kristina.
You too.